In this video, I'm going to take a look at the Tamron Adaptall 500mm mirror lens. I've never been desperately keen to buy a mirror lens, but I have been curious about what it's like to use one, and I think many photographers are in the same boat. So if you'd like to learn more about mirror lenses and what you can expect if you do buy one, then I think you'll find this video interesting. And if you have tried a mirror lens, then I hope you'll still enjoy some of the images and videos I'll be showing you, ranging from the beautiful to the bizarre. My own view before buying the lens is that yes, I could see the benefits of using a 500mm lens that isn't the size of a bazooka and doesn't cost a fortune. A lens that could be fun for far-off wildlife, landscape or street shots, or shooting the moon and stars. On the negative side, I'm not that keen on the donut-shaped effects I've seen these lenses produce. They seem a bit gimmicky after a while. Anyway, my mirror lens was an opportunistic buy at a car boot sale. It was sitting on a trestled table in its original case. I watched two different people inspect the lens. When they took the lens out of its case, they had a look of, how best to describe it, a look of disgust. When I got to the lens, I could immediately see why. The mirror inside the lens was covered in fungus growth, and there was mold growing on the inside sides of the lens. I guess the other two people had decided it was too much of a challenge to try and clean the lens. I like a challenge, so I bought it. Back home, it was a simple job to take the lens apart, and in doing so I learnt two things. Firstly, I got a much better understanding of how a mirror lens actually works, and more on this in a moment. Secondly, it's clear the lens would make a really interesting macro garden, to grow tiny plants if I couldn't get it to work. That's why the fungus grew so well. Alternatively, I could disinfect the body and use it as a fun coffee cup. Fortunately, I managed to clean up the insides and polish the mirror, and I got it all back together in good working order. Basically, light passes through the front element. It's a pretty thick front element, and it hits the mirror at the rear. It bounces back up the lens to this mirror at the front. The light is then reflected by the mirror back down the body again, but this time through the center of the rear end mirror and onto the camera's film or sensor. Through these back and forth reflections, the lens achieves its focal distance of 500mm, a very simple transmission of light, as long as the mirrors are clean and are properly positioned and aligned to reflect back to the right areas. With the design of the front element and rear mirror, both having a hole in the middle, you can see how and why the lens produces donut-shaped highlights. Two other important points to note. My lens is the 55BB variant, a lens that was, according to Tamron themselves, optimized for shooting nearby objects, hence the name Tele Macro. The earlier 55B version, in contrast, apparently was optimized for shooting remote subjects. And the lens doesn't have any aperture blades. It's calculated to be a fixed f8. This lens was made sometime between 1983 and 2006, with 7 elements in 4 groups. SP stands for Super Performance, the best of the Tamron lenses at the time. The lens comes with a good deep hood, and it's an essential addition if you want to maximize contrasts. These lenses also came with a filter kit with different coloured filters that screwed onto the back. My lens only has one of these filters, a normal uncoloured filter. So that's the design of the lens. Now let's look at what it's like to use and how it performs. Well, to start with, it's an Adaptall lens, so you need the right Adaptall adapter for your camera. I'm using a Pentax K mount adapter for my lens, and I use the lens on a full-frame Pentax K1, and with another adapter I use it on my Sony A7 IV. With these adapters, the lens operates smoothly to infinity and down to its minimum focusing distance of around 1.7 meters. The lens is heavy. It's solidly built with a lot of metal and glass, and together with the hood, it weighs in at an impressive 659 grams. It gives the camera a rather front-heavy feel, but it's nothing like using a conventional 300mm plus lens. Indeed, it's relatively compact. With its 500mm reach and fixed f8 speed, it's vital to have a stable platform for taking shots. In-camera shake reduction doesn't help that much with this type of lens. I wouldn't say it's impossible to use the lens as a handheld walk-around, but it's not a straightforward proposition, and the lens benefits enormously from having a very stable base, at least a wall, for example, if not a tripod. It also helps to dial up the ISO setting to get a faster exposure speed wherever possible. I would say on a typical handheld outing with the lens, over half of my shots suffer from camera shake or my failure to nail the focus, and that's not good news. Starting with long-distance shots on full-frame cameras, this 500mm lens does indeed give you a very impressive reach. Here's a scene photographed with a mobile phone camera for reference. It's roughly what the human eye sees. And here's a swan in the same location, photographed at the lens's maximum distance. Secured on the bridge, the lens is reasonably sharp, as you can see if I zoom a little into the image. I was delighted with this outcome. The problem I found with this lens is that even with the steady camera, it's hard to get a good in-focus image, as you can see from another swan shot. I was using the camera's digital focusing aids, and the swan wasn't moving around too much, but just a very slight misfocus makes a big difference. Part of the reason for the misfocus is the extremely narrow depth of field. If the focus is just a little off, the part of the image you want to be in focus won't be. The second reason is the lens's slow speed set at f8. Any significant movement from your subject, and your subject may get out of focus. Whatever the reasons, producing lots of out-of-focus shots is very frustrating. You may, like me, have significant experience using manual focus lenses, but 500mm photography really is a different experience. I can demonstrate the issues with this photograph of a train station. Again, you can see the impressive telephoto reach of the lens, comparing its image with a mobile phone image. In this shot, I was trying to focus on the front of the bridge, but just missed the focus, even using focus peaking. You can see how the people walking on the platform are blurred. That's understandable at f8. The lens is not fast enough to deal with movement. But given it is f8, you might think other stationary things down the platform would be more in focus. The actual focus I achieved was a few lampposts in front of the bridge. That's a reasonable distance from the bridge, but in the viewfinder and using the focus ring, this is a tiny adjustment to the focus. When you do just about nail the focus, as I did with this dog walker across the bridge, well, the image is sharpish. I've given it some post-processing to bring out the details. Whilst it's clearly not bitingly sharp, it's okay, given how far away I was from the bridge itself. One other observation I make about the lens and long-distance shots is that it has a relatively low contrast, and you'll probably need to do some post-processing on images to bring out a higher definition, higher contrast look. I can illustrate this easily using an iPhone shot of another train track. You can see the strong colours and contrast delivered by the iPhone using its internal processing, and this image comes straight out of the phone. And now the mirror lens is shot of the same scene a few seconds later, straight out of camera. The whole image lacks the vibrant colours and contrasts of the iPhone shot. The sky isn't as blue as it should look, even on the horizon, and the train is not as deeply red as it looks in real life. I can post-process boost some contrast and colour into the image, but not into that sky. As well as snapping animals and landscapes, it can be a fun walk-around town lens in the right conditions. It may be a heavy, unwieldy lens, but it's not so heavy that you feel it's too much of a slog to carry around for at least a reasonably short walk. It's not a lens I'd have in my bag with other lenses, just in case I felt like whipping it out. No, it's a serious lens that you need to commit to using when you're going somewhere where you know you want to use a 500mm lens. I especially like using the lens for long-distance shots of people. You can get some quite intimate shots from a long way away, in other words, without being seen to be too intrusive. It's not so socially acceptable these days to take photos of strangers on the street, especially with large camera and lens. But with this 500mm lens, you can be far enough away not to be noticed all the time. Back to my first image, and it highlights one of the cons of the lens, and that is the way it handles bright light. Basically, it doesn't like brightly exposed areas, possibly because of a lack of effective coatings. I often needed to manually dial down exposure settings from the camera's auto exposure settings, sometimes quite a lot, in an attempt to avoid too many blown areas. This resulted in some quite artsy dark images that I rather liked. But in very bright sunlight, it was just about impossible to avoid overblown areas. With this caveat, I really enjoy walking around town and gardens, snapping people from far away. After trying the street scenes handheld, I took the lens for a walk down by the River Thames with a tripod. I was lucky enough to see this swan flying low over the water. It's a crop, and I'm rather pleased with the result and the details on the swan. I was following the swan in flight by rotating the tripod head. It would have been useful to own this lens when my daughter was in her school's rowing team. One of the great things to do with a 500mm lens is to take photos of the moon and stars. Here in London we've had a series of storms flying over from the Atlantic, and not much opportunity to capture a full moon in clear skies. I did, however, take this snap of the moon when the clouds cleared one night. This is the full frame straight out of camera result. I've cropped the image down and sharpened it a bit to produce what I think is a pretty good result. There's no doubt there are better performing long telephoto non-mirror lenses you can buy for moonshots if you have a lot of money to spend, but this is going to be my moon lens of choice from now on. With its 500mm reach, it is easier to nail the focus than my shorter telephoto lenses, and I found it relatively easy to find the right exposure time settings at f8. In terms of taking photos of stars, well, we have too much light pollution here in London to test this. But reading online comments, the consensus seems to be that the less than stellar optics of mirror lenses and their slow speeds are not ideal for astrophotography. On the other hand, users point out that given the compact size and relative affordability of a mirror lens, if it's one of the better ones, it's not a bad option if you know how to use it. Plus the higher ISO performance of modern cameras somewhat negates the slower speed of the lens. And now from far-off shots to close-up shots. The lens is called a Tele Macro for a reason. It has a minimum focusing distance of 1.7 meters, and as a 500mm lens, it certainly gives you a close-up macro-style view. In practice, I found it rather unwieldy for macro-style shots. The view through the viewfinder may be macro-style, but you're not exactly close up to your subject physically. It's a rather unnatural feeling. Here's a snap of me taking a photo of the front of a car. As you can see, I'm some distance away from the car. And this is the photo I took with my full-frame camera. It actually looks nice and close up, but that wasn't the reality. If the lens is well stabilized, then the images are reasonably sharp, and because it's f8, that sharpness extends across the frame. You can see some test results here. Perhaps not surprisingly, the lens is not as bitingly sharp as a proper 50 to 100mm macro lens stopped down. If you are looking for an excellent macro lens, then the Tamron Adaptall 290 f2.5 would be a much better bet, especially with the 1:1 extension tube. Back to the mirror lens. With its 500mm focal range, it does help focus close up on subjects that would be out of reach for other lenses, for example the flowers in this magnolia tree, and some other close-up shots. One obvious benefit it has as a macro lens is where you're attempting to photograph animals that don't like you getting close up, or you don't want to wake them up. This would be an excellent lens to take to the zoo, although not perhaps for handheld videos. Close up, you can also have a lot of fun playing with large donuts. But before I feature donuts, I should talk about bokeh. Using a 500mm lens with close-up capabilities, you might expect the blur to be super smooth. And it is super smooth when the lens is photographing uncluttered backgrounds and foregrounds. Where you have uncluttered out-of-focus areas, the subject isolation can be superb. However, with busy backgrounds, the out-of-focus rendering can be very busy, messy and ugly, and sometimes downright bizarre. Exhibit A is this photo, one of the most extraordinary photos I've taken with any lens, and I don't mean this in a good way. The guy seems to be playing to an audience of the living dead. That man wearing sunglasses, he's turned into a walking skeleton, and his wife, not a good look, the antithesis of beautiful bokeh. I have accentuated the details for dramatic effect, but straight out of camera, it's still a horror film result. This may be the worst case rendering, but you may think Exhibit B is equally weird. Try to look past the donuts for the moment, and look at the jumbled mess in the foreground, in front of the in-focus bike seat, All this is a line of bikes outside a train station. However, the lens has rendered the line as if it's been tossed around in a washing machine with nuts. And another street shot. In my opinion, this is ugly blur. It's not even strange enough to be fascinating. It's just plain ugly. Okay, you could argue I've been choosing images where the background or the foreground is quite close to the subjects in focus, and the lens is struggling to handle the closer-up busyness in the composition. However, even where the busy background is further away, the lens can still produce messy bokeh. I know these are busy scenes, but at 500mm you might expect a little more smoothing out of the background or foreground. On the contrary, the lens seems to revel in the mess, like a pig in, well, like it's drunk too much wine, really. And this brings us nicely onto another bizarre feature of this lens, bizarre relative to conventional lenses, and that's donuts. So far I've tried to avoid showing you a lot of images with obvious donuts, although it's unavoidable in the last few bokeh images with busy backgrounds. But now it's time to feast on these very distinctive donut effects. The first observation to make is that the donuts come from bright points of light, in the same way as conventional lenses produce out-of-focus spectral highlights and bubbles. The donuts are easy to produce with direct highlights, or bright light is reflecting off objects. This is the most donut-covered image I've managed to take so far, produced from both direct and reflected points of light. As a rule, the donuts grow larger the closer you focus, as I can demonstrate with this video, taken at night, starting with a focus on traffic some distance away. As I shorten the focus distance, the donuts grow larger and larger. This means that you can produce some very large donuts in your photos if you want. The curvature of the glass elements also causes the donuts to distort towards the outer edges of the frame, as you can see in these images, so you'll get distorted cat's eye shaped effects. I think these effects really are an acquired taste, a Marmite taste as we'd say in England. You'll either love them or hate them. The production of donuts is very predictable given bright highlights, so in theory you can decide whether or not you're happy with donuts in your compositions, and if you're not happy you can try to avoid them. A big downside of the lens is that the donuts can also, irritatingly, appear in less obvious scenes, in lighting where you might not expect donuts to be produced. The donuts will sneak into scenes where there are no obvious highlights, but here, nevertheless, are the donuts. The only practical approach really is to embrace the donuts, and to hero them in your compositions. To try and find compositions where the donuts add something interesting or amazing to the scene. To essentially say to the viewer, okay, you know you're going to see donuts, but they're going to look good. They're going to be very much part of what makes the photo beautiful or attractive. Or conversely, you may not have expected to see donuts if you don't know about mirror lenses, for example, and the donuts are going to surprise you in a good way. In conclusion, that's the message I've come away with using this lens. Embrace your donuts. Make them something special. And in terms of the lens's downside, if you get sick of donuts, or you're horrified at the awful rendering of blur in some images, then find compositions where the donuts won't show, and the blur is not a factor. Because this lens has other benefits. It has an exceedingly long reach for its size, with reasonably good quality results, especially after boosting the contrasts and colours in post-processing. It's not a macro lens, but its close-up capabilities are good, if a bit unwieldy to use, and the bokeh can be exceptionally smooth and rather lovely. Once you've tried telephoto and close-up compositions, you can always go back for some more donuts. Overall, I've had a lot of fun trying this lens. It's produced some beautiful photographs, as well as some fascinating, bizarre images. It's been frustrating too, failing to nail the focus, or failing to capture moving subjects at f8, and messing up some potentially good shots. I know my copy is dirt cheap, but I think I would seriously consider buying a mirror lens at market prices, now I know what it's like. I'll probably use it more than my old 200mm and 300mm lenses. Anyway, that's my review. There are a number of other makes of mirror lens to check out if you're interested. Tamron's SP Adaptall 2 seems to be one of the better ones, but you may have a different experience, so please comment below. And until the next time, all the best.